Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our latest Meet the Management podcast. My name's Marc Ashton, and today we are talking about the subject of digital infrastructure. Is it the next big asset class in South Africa? To help us answer this question, I'm joined by Albert Oosthuysen, CEO of Net99 and Evotel. Albert, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Maybe a starting point, just tell us a little bit about who Albert Oosthuysen is and his entrepreneurial journey to date.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. So I started Evotel 2015, 2016. I say 2015, 2016 because it took a long time to get the business registered, but it was officially registered 2015. And we've been trying to build networks since then. And it started with, building sort of small, self-funded, bootstrapping the business. Until we could attract some investment from private equity. And then we built as much as we could in Evotel before we ran out of space. So it was a land grab, and we grabbed as much land as we could. But the real passion that we've always wanted to do was to go into townships. So that we wanted to do that when we started. There wasn't much support for it. We couldn't find funding for it. It wasn't the low-hanging fruit at the time, and smart money is really just, money moves together. So no one wanted to back the not the low-hanging fruit, which at the time was the leafy suburbs. Townships was an unnecessary risk at that stage. So when we had built enough homes in Evotel, we could we could make the point to go, we've done as much as we could. There's no more space to grow. The growth lies in townships, and we could do, we could do townships. And we got some funding to go do the first POC for Net99, Net99 being the township play. And we did our first POC in Kagiso, which was close to a Evotel area. And we sort of leveraged a live network, so backhaul that we could make live quickly, and some relationships, the municipality, and then some contractors that was local that we could use. And that's how we started Net99. The first network was small. It was sub 10,000. But that's where we cut our teeth. That's where we learned our lessons. We had sleepless nights for the first bit, trying to figure out payments and uh, community engagement and involvement and sales and all of that. And from there, we had a successful, proof of concept that we could go get additional funding on, and that's how we started. That's the journey in a nutshell.
And what are you looking to solve for? I mean, what's the passion about fiber and fiber infrastructure? What are you looking to solve for?
Yeah, so I mean, township specifically being for us the passion. There was just such a big gap in terms of what data was being sold into the townships. Prior to fiber, there were some WISP, some wireless internet service providers selling into townships, but it was limited to, there wasn't a lot being deployed into townships. So really the only option that townships had, the township community had, was the mobile connectivity, which, if you're selling data gigs is, and, you're trying to stream something, or you're trying to just use data and have access to data, is hellishly expensive, and it's a problem that needed to be solved. And so that's why we were super interested in township, you know, supplying fiber to township economies. And when we initially did, and we did our proof of concept, we were obviously nervous. Would people pay a price? Our price isn't the lowest. We sell a price 379 for an uncapped sort of service, but it's for the whole family. It's not per device, it's not per day, it's for the month, it's for the family. So the question was, would people pay? How would they pay? Would we get penetration? And you know, the hardest thing we had to figure out and to convince the community of was that uncapped is a thing. So, it took us a long, long time to convince the community that we're not a scam. So we opened shops to show people that we actually there to stay. Um, and that uncapped really does mean uncapped. Data doesn't disappear. You pay once and you use as much as you want, eat as much as you want. That took a long time to get that point across and for the trust to be built. But once it did, the consumption behavior just night and day changed. There was a complete paradigm shift for the communities. So that's really what drives us, is you get access to data and the behavior just changes.
The subject for today, we're looking at this topic of digital infrastructure as an asset class. I mean, I think we've seen things like solar as an asset class. We've seen kind of
Yeah.
traditional bricks and mortar. Today, we're talking digital infrastructure. Maybe before we kind of drill down into that, maybe just give us a sense of who your investors are and kind of your shareholder base. Give us a sense of what that looks like.
So yeah, from the beginning, so we've been initially was self-funded up to a point where we ran out of money. So we bootstrapped it as long as we could, and then we got in some real trouble, and and we got private equity to start backing us, and we've had private equity in since 2018, I think it was. We've taken on additional private equity. Um, Private equity has given us the chance to scale to a point where we could take, vanilla funding. So we took debt into the business. So we have a large chunk of equity and then geared with debt. And then some of the new partners that have entered are a bit longer. So they're not sort of private equity that needs a 5-year, 7-year, 10-year horizon. They can go a bit longer. But ultimately, there's sort of a view to exit at some point for some of the private equity guys. But it's been that we haven't sort of touched any sort of REIT structures. So that seems to be the hot topic at the moment. And there was a suggestion to change legislation recently to include digital assets into property type, infrastructure funds. I don't know if it was approved or it was just proposed. I think it's sort of still out. You probably know better than
Yeah,
I
I think
do.
my understanding is it's still up for discussion from a
Yeah.
structuring perspective.
So that's sort of I think that is the way it's going. I mean, as a asset class, it's a fixed asset. It's a rental-based type asset. You generally have the F&O and the ISP type dynamic where the F&O is the asset holder and the ISP is the service provider. In Evotel, we've had Evotel as the purely open access F&O, and we've had ISPs provide service on Evotel. On Net99, we sort of remodeled that where we still have a company that owns the infrastructure and we have a company that is the ISP, but we had to remove as much fat from the system. So it had to be sort of vertically integrated in order to give the best possible price. And we sort of redid the whole building process and everything. But that is the idea. You got a landlord and a tenant.
Yep. You kind of intimated or touched on it earlier. I mean, it's an interesting space to go into township economy, emerging infrastructure, etc. There's pros and cons to it. If you look at your discussions with potential investors, what are they seeing as the pros and cons of this digital infrastructure as an asset class?
Um, Specifically related to the township, I think what everyone's really excited about is there's this general hesitation or nervousness about investing into the townships. So you sort of got the formal economy, the funders, banks, etc., and then you have the informal economy that's largely unquantified
Mm.
because there's so much cash, moving through the township economy that's not formally captured in banking. So that's being changed. I mean, Capitec and Time and all the banks, Pep's bringing out a bank next year. That's sort of capturing that informal economy into the formal economy. But if you have assets that are exposed to the informal economy, you're almost bridging the gap between the formal and the informal economy. And I think that's what's exciting, is it opens up it's really big. It's a platform to build a bridge between the two.
One of the things that's obviously going to be very topical is the role of policy in your rollout and kind of all lifting all boats in the broader discussion. I mean, I think historically there's been quite a lot of tension between the public sector and private sector, specifically looking at the ministers that have come before in the kind of technology cluster. I get the sense, having interacted with a couple of people, that Minister Malatsi seems to be quite a forward-thinking minister, making genuine outreach to the private sector, looking at public-private partnerships. Your thoughts on your interactions with him?
Yeah, so I mean, I want to be very complimentary, but I've like, you always have to be careful of like the politics and the politicians, but we've had such a good experience with the guy. Like he's come to, to visit us. He's come to visit our competitors, and he's gone to see like what's going on in the market, and he asked us, what could they do to improve our interaction with, government, because all of us interact with government. We all ask for wayleaves. We all engage with municipalities. We all engage with SARS, and all of us are CapEx driven businesses where we invest heavy CapEx, and then there's a massive VAT receivable. So we all engage with government on numerous fronts. And his question was, how do we help? What do we do differently? And I mean, if you've been sitting on frustrations for so long, we were this pressurized bottle that just opened, and we dumped on him, and we sort of didn't expect very much to come back. And he came back. He's like, he did a press release not long after, like a month after. He's like, this is what he wants to do. This is what he wants to do, and it was all the things we mentioned. We've reached out if we really got stuck. We've reached out to him sort of and said, like, look, we really struggle. Who do we deal with in government? And he's been very happy to help, or his people to help, to sort of like, look, go chat to this guy or this guy, and gotten problems over the line. So, he has been, yeah, we are massively complimentary to the guy. And I do know there's, political factions and all that. So I don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot too hard. But no, we really are very happy with the guy.
Maybe closing question. If you were going to leave a message for potential investors considering digital infrastructure as an asset class, what would be your closing comment or thought to them?
Look, I've never understood why it isn't in in. So I'm a big supporter of it also. You've got a fixed infrastructure asset that it's not going anywhere, right? So like I mentioned earlier, it is almost like property. Your question always is your question is, you know, occupancy
Mm.
or penetration rate and all that. The trend is to go digital. So for us, I mean, the digital infrastructure really can include it, data centers. It can include all kinds of, towers, etc. But that's where the world is going. Everyone's using more and more data. They're not using less data. AI is growing, so this is the asset class really that should be, an asset class that can be, you know, that can be risked against, that can be, for the long term, so it should be an infrastructure asset class in my view. And I think that's a view that's shared by everyone and that with that, it opens up the market. It opens up the market to grow into Africa. And really, it's not a class that's going away. It's the class of the future.
The asset class of the future, digital infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for today. Albert Oosthuysen, thank you very much for joining us. To our viewers, please remember to visit www.meetthemanagement.com, and looking forward to following your journey. Thank you, Albert.
Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.